Well, hello, welcome back to Black Hammer Artisan. Today, I'm going to be making a Sgian dubh knife. Sgian dubh knives are just kind of a small, general utility knife. It's a very important part of Celtic history, and I've always liked the way they look, so let's get into it. In Scottish Gaelic, the word Sgian means knife, and the word dubh means black or dark, depending. And I expect the reason behind that was because oftentimes they would use bog oak for the handle. If you look at a lot of historical examples, they're very dark black bog oak. Today we'll just be using a piece of hickory. Oftentimes they would also use other woods. They might use bone for the handle sometimes. Without further ado, let's get into it. So this is the piece of steel I'm going to be using. It's just a piece of, I've already flattened it out, but it's a piece of railroad clip. It's kind of a springy steel, but not extremely high carbon, so I can quench it in water, which is good. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is I'm just thinning this out because it's obviously way too thick. As you can see, if you look at my anvil, the corners are pretty sharp. I like to keep it pretty sharp so I can do stuff. But right here, I have them pretty heavily rounded off, like that. And the reason for that is it's kind of like the cross peen of the hammer. You hit it and it's very concentrated into one place. Makes a deep, powerful strike. So I'm taking and I'm hitting on the corner of the anvil to draw it out. And sometimes I'm even hitting with the peen of the hammer both ways, kind of like a fuller. So that's just it's gonna spread it out quicker so I can draw this out without too much extra work. And I am still drawing out. It's kind of too low of a heat to work. Actually, I'm going to stick this back in the forge. Probably not going to get a lot past this tonight, but just got it pretty much almost done. A little more to do. So I've got this thinned down sufficiently, enough of it. I'm going to cut it tomorrow morning, probably around there. We're going to call it good for the night because it's getting kind of dark. And this is about 2 weeks later. And I'm just, as you can see, I've already cut most of the way through. Like I said last time, we forged this out, and now I'm cutting off the part that's been thinned. And this is kind of sketchy to do, to cut it that close, but as you can see, didn't go quite all the way through. And it's been cut. Okay, so this isn't necessarily necessary, and I have done it without doing this, but it is a good idea. You can just use a file for this if you want. Honestly, that might work better than the rasp. And I'm just making sure that there's no little burr on the edge. The reason for that is because it's a tiny little thin burr. You can very easily fold that over and make a cold shut. And a cold shut, if you don't know what that is exactly what it sounds like. It's where it's like shut against itself, but not welded. And that's just a weakness in your blade, something you definitely don't want there. It also makes a serious aesthetic failure that is not something you want. So just kind of going around and making sure that there's no edges, especially when you cut something. There tends to be a little bit of an edge, a little bit of a burr left where you cut it. That's all pretty nicely rounded off and beveled. Okay, so I'm beveling back this edge right here. Some people like to do this different ways, but this is the way I do it. Kind of beveling back this edge. I'm going to draw this to a point. And you always, while you're going, at least in my opinion, you do want to generally clean things up as you go. So like I'm doing this, it's going to kind of dog ear out like that. Flattening that out, keeping it stiff. Now there is a method, and the name is escaping me. One of the blacksmith teachers I had told me, and it was not his method. It was, where basically you just do kind of the math, and you figure out almost exactly how many blows it will take you to make a particular thing that you're very familiar with making. And you don't do usually as much cleanup as you go. You usually do it in stages, and you just kind of do all the cleanup at the end, basically. So if you're very, very familiar with making a product, you might be able to get away with that. That's not the way that I'm working here. One thing about working a smaller piece of steel like this, thinner, is it's going to cool down a lot faster, which is why you should not be talking while you do it. Also, hitting hard will actually help you to maintain some amount of that heat. So keep that in mind. Basically what I'm doing, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to wind up with a little tiny cold shut on the end of this piece. Probably be okay. I will just cut that off and that'll be fine. A lot of people do that on purpose. They will intentionally draw it to a little fish mouth on the end and then cut that fish mouth off. And that's okay, but I don't see why you should really do that if you don't have to. In this case, I'm probably going to have to. But if you can avoid it, I like to. Yeah. This is a debatable, what I'm doing right now is, you don't necessarily have to, but I'm drawing it on the horn of the anvil, and the reason is just so I don't hit the edges of the flat on the anvil. So it is probably going to curve it backwards a little bit. That's okay though, because I can straighten it out. And right there is our cold shut I was talking about. And so I'm now going to cut it off the reverse direction. Probably flip it over. Just right about there. And whenever you cut something off, you want to hit it hard the first time, because otherwise, if you hit it lightly, what'll happen is it'll leave a little mark, but not necessarily deep enough for you to find on here, and you'll just wind up putting multiple cut marks in it before you actually cut through it. So always hit hard the first time. Just get lined up properly and do it right the first time. There we go. Going over to the vise here. You can see the burr right there. I'm about to take that off. Just kind of make everything a little bit more round and smooth and less problematic. Sharp knives are for after you're done forging. Okay, so I'm now going to try and center the point best as I can, because obviously you can tell it's not at all centered, which is totally fine for this point, but yeah. See you getting closer to the center there. Also, I should probably mention, if you want to replicate this, you don't have to have as much material as I have here. I intentionally cut off more than I would need, because you can always take material off. You cannot always add material. That is to say, adding material can be very, very difficult. And it's really ideal to probably not work into quite this low of a heat, but there you go. Point is almost centered. And for this stage, that right there is plenty centered. So I'm kind of beveling this, but really this is not really the beveling stage yet. I'm just kind of getting an idea of what things are looking like. I'm gonna cut some material off the back here in a little bit. And then I will be drawing down the Tang, which is the next stage of this process. Also just kind of making sure I like the way this knife profile is looking. It's going to be a fairly short knife. Okay, so we'll make the Tang next. Going in for the first heat on the Tang. And I'm going to work this back towards myself, because even though that'll probably make me do a little more work, that way I don't wind up with too short of a blade on accident. Oops. There we go, it's starting to look like a knife. I'm thinking it's going to turn out to be a little bit bigger than a typical Sgian dubh knife, but that'll be okay. You got to be careful about it when it gets to this thin, because I actually just brought it up to a very high welding heat, nearly burned it. I think it should be just fine, but it's close. When it gets this long and thin, it heats up very quickly, and it's very easy to miss it when it gets that hot. Okay. Right now I'm just pretty much straightening everything up, making sure it looks good, because after just a little bit of tuning up, this thing's going to be basically ready to start. Well, I guess I still need to bevel it, so. Okay, so here I'm just kind of got in the vise. I didn't hardly need this, but just making sure everything's kind of straight, in line. It does need just a little tiny bit of straightening, so I'm gonna take this back over to the anvil real quick. Yeah, it always gets, you know, kind of have to straighten stuff up pretty well every time. So what I'm doing right here, setting in the shoulders, making sure everything's good and clean, so it all sets nicely together when I go to set the handle on it. This is probably honestly too low of a heat to be doing this, and I'm gonna have to heat it up again in a second. Honestly, I probably could have brought it up to a higher heat this time too, but don't like sticking stuff back in the fire when I pull it out. So, in case you haven't seen me do this on my other videos, this is called hot rasping, and it's rasping while it's hot. The point of hot rasping, it's kind of like, takes part of the place of what we do modernly. We would do grinding. So it takes material off faster than you can with a file ordinarily. And also leaves the, never mind about that. I pulled a Joe Biden. Okay. So I'm beveling the blade here, just bringing it down basically to an edge. Pretty self-explanatory. You hit it close to the edge, try not to hit your anvil while you do it. And it's going to bend over whichever side you're beveling it. It's going to bend over, so how you know you got it beveled about right is when you bevel the other side. If it straightens itself out pretty good, then you did it right. Assuming it was straight to begin with. Kind of running out of heat here. I probably won't be able to finish this side on this heat. But yeah, beveling's not terribly complicated or difficult. And back into the fire. So what I'm doing right now is just kind of profiling the knife, getting it to kind of the blade shape I want. And there's not really a practical reason for the particular one. Oops, don't do that. Just take a look at this. It's stuck. There's not really a reason for this particular blade shape that I know of. Just I like it. So this is definitely turning out a little bit longer than I had originally envisioned. I think that's going to be okay because not all Sgian dubhs are created equal. But take that into account if you want to make this and you want to make it a little bit more like what you might think of as a little bit more traditional Sgian dubh. Probably use a little bit less material or just cut it. I could cut it, but I don't want to. I kind of like the way it's turning out, so. I'm kind of just draw filing this to make sure that it's how I like it. Getting any nasty little bumps out that's hard to get out with the hammer. Sorry about the noise. Always love seeing the colors run when I do that. That turned out pretty good on that side. Let's do the same thing on the other side. This isn't hardly hot filing. I mean, it is kind of warm, but not properly hot enough for hot filing. I'm being a little more careful than I would be if I was hot filing. I'm going to show you two things. One thing, I want you to see how these colors ice over here. Look at that. You can see that turn to yellow. It's going to start turning to blue. See over here, it's already turning to blue. And just turned to like a dark purple and then blue. But the thing I actually wanted to show you was when you go like this, you can instantly see the high and low spots that are actually, believe it or not, they actually are kind of hard to see before you do that. So you want to get all those kind of low spots out of there, in my opinion. You probably could live with a few, but I don't know. It's just safer to get them out. And that'll also take a good look at it after you do that and just make sure there's no cold shuts or anything. And so far it's looking pretty good. So now I'm just going to kind of take a little bit off this end of the tip because I can see that it's not quite even. So I'm just going to stick that like that. Okay, so there's our blade shape. I think it's looking pretty good. Yeah. It's not quite finished yet, obviously. And it still needs a little more beveling. I think because I don't want to have to do it all with a file. There's a little bit more delicate beveling here because I'm getting it down to a fairly fine edge. And I will file this again just like I did before after I'm done with this, right, what I'm doing right now. But it'll be a lot easier. Be a lot less material to take off. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm taking this rasp, which is like a really, really coarse file, and I am working up the edge of the knife to where I'm going to bring it down to basically a 0. And then I'm going to work up a little bit onto the blade so it has a smooth transition and cuts better. And from there we'll probably do some fit up and then heat treating, and we'll be close to done. Let's switch to the other edge. It would be ideal if my vise was more secured down than it is, but it's kind of a temporary spot for it anyway, so. So one of the handy things about doing it this way, or I'm leaving the scale on, is I don't really have to have a nice finish on the blade. I don't have to do any hand sanding, none of that, no buffing or anything like that. And also, since we're working with, you know, old style tools, I don't have a lot of the equipment to do that very easily. So this really saves me a lot of work doing it this way. This is going to be the handle, provided everything works out. What I'm trying to do right now, other than burning off the end of my little poker thing here, is I'm trying to actually burn a hole all the way through this. This is going to be the handle. And it's not working perfectly. It's not working super well so far. So I tried to burn the hole through it, and that didn't really work. It just had problems, kept on bending, and also I was afraid that it was going to burn the hole too big on this end before it reached this end. So instead, I drilled the hole through with a hand drill. Medievally, they would have used a hand auger. I didn't have one that was small enough, so I'll need to get one or make one. You can see it snowed, and now I'm going to be fitting the handle onto the Tang. Right, so I'm just burning in the shape of the Tang, trying to be speedy. Pretty good. Alright, I am going to cool off the Tang here so it doesn't burn it at all, and then see if I like the fit up, and if I don't, I'll heat it up again. Alright, so this is how it turned out. Turned out pretty good from the burning. Just fits up pretty nice and tight. I like it. So we're gonna move on to the next step. The knife blade is pretty well finished, and before we move on to the heat treating, now is the point when you're gonna wanna add anything like a Touchmark or any sort of stamp, because after you heat treat it, you're not going to want to heat it back up. Done. Not too bad. Okay, so last time I used a lighter hammer and I think that was a mistake. So I am using a heavy one now. Try and set it real good the first time, and I think it worked. Hopefully. Because I got the other one just a little bit double stamped. Yeah, this one's looking perfect. So not perfect, but that's the first time I've actually used that Touchmark since I had it made. Okay, so I have just thinned this down to a reasonable thinness. This is going to be the cap on the end of the knife, so I can rivet the tang over onto it. So I'm now going to cut it off and cut off the edges and, you know, make it right. Let's see if I can break this off in the vise. There we go. That'll probably do it. Take it to the vise and bust them off. The reason I'm busting these off is just because I don't want to take another heat to heat it up and trim it and stuff. It's kind of a pain. With this thin of a piece, it just cools down so fast. Yeah, probably take the sharp edges off that. This is a good case where I do use a glove. I don't really like using gloves very often, but I would definitely be burning the underside of my hand if I wasn't using the glove here, so that's why I'm doing that. Let's see, yeah, I got a good frog's eye there. So if you can see that, right there, it's what's called the frog's eye. You can kind of see where I'm punching, and I won't be able to punch it through this on this heat, but I can probably mark it out a little bit. So I'm gonna go back into the fire, grab another heat, and that will probably be, I'll be able to punch it through and then drift a little bit bigger with this one, and then we'll go over to the tang to drift it to its final size. That wasn't a perfect punch, but it worked out. There's the plug. Usually works a little bit easier than that, but you can see the hole. And the next heat, I suppose I'll drift it. Here, I'm just going to flatten it out. This is where I wish I brought my flatter. I'm just kind of going around to the different corners of the hardy hole here to try and stop it from getting too over punched on one side. Kind of, you know. The reason I'm using the hardy hole is because the pritchard hole on this anvil is way, way too big. Otherwise, ideally, you'd be using the pitch hole. Darn it. I've got to stop dropping things one of these days. So I don't think what I just did takes a lot of explaining. It's pretty self-explanatory. All right, so this is kind of what it looks like fit up. I'm gonna need to file these down so they fit with the handle, and that'll just be the next step. So I'll skip most of that. Just trying to file it down to match with the butt end of the handle here. Okay, so here's the three parts. They go together pretty well. I already went ahead and trimmed the tang to the appropriate length off camera so I can rivet it down, because you don't really need to see how I do that. You already know, I just used a hot cut. Next step will just be heat treating the blade, riveting this over, and yeah, and we'll see how it's looking. Okay, so you can't really see it, but I brought it up to a bright, kind of the bright side of a cherry red. I'm just gonna let it kind of sit for quite a while until it's cold enough I can touch it. And that's normalizing. I'm gonna do that 2 more times after this one, and then I'm gonna quench it. Okay, so just finished normalizing it. You know, we didn't obviously have to show all that, but heated it up and just let it air cool till you can grab it and it doesn't burn you at all. Basically till it's cool to the touch 3 times. And then now, because it's soft right now, I'm going to file the edges, and that's partially just to bring them down to their final or near final dimension. Partially that's also because I want the scale layer over them to be very thin so I can see the temper colors. I've already done it on this side and I'm about to do it to this side. I'm gonna be draw filing is what it's called. So basically just kind of, instead of going like this straight, I'm gonna be going down like that. You don't wanna bring it down too thin because the edges, because they're thinner, will cool quicker. And if they cool too fast, they will crack. So, a blacksmith teacher of mine told me a little secret that actually burning wood helps get the scale off. Don't ask me why. I don't really know anything about science, but I have seen it work, and it's actually working right now. I'm going to go over to the anvil to finish brushing. Just want to get any real hard scale off. Yeah, it's all looking pretty good. Here's the thing with water quench. You do not want to cool it all the way down. You want to leave a little bit of heat in there. Otherwise, you definitely risk cracking your blade. Water quenches are just dangerous in general. So on how I'm going to test if this is hard enough, see carefully, because it's very, very brittle right now. I'm going to see if a file cuts it. That file is skating, which is surprising because this is a high carbon steel, you could say, but on the very low spectrum of a high carbon steel. It's kind of a medium carbon steel, really. All right, so now I'm just going to kind of clean up the edges a little bit with the file so I can see the temper colors. And then I'm going to just do a quick rough temper over the forge. So I don't know if you can see or not, hopefully you can, but you can see the mostly kind of a blue and some slightly straw color spots on the edge here, and that is because I just tempered it. And then the reason why I just quenched it again, just to arrest the temper. You don't want to get too soft. So when you get it to that color, you just dip it in some water or oil or whatever you got around and arrest that temper so it just stays how you like it. And next step, I'm just going to brush it off and then rivet the handle on. We'll be about done. So I brought it down as thin as I dared before I quenched it. It quenched successfully, no cracks in the edge, and so now I'm just finishing that and bringing the scale off the edge. Already did this side. I'm going to do this side. I also gave it a good brushing. Okay, so now I'm going to rivet this over onto the cap here using my ball peen hammer. And I stuck it in this glove so it wouldn't scratch up the knife blade when because I got this real tight clamped in there. And yeah, I'm just gonna be doing this for a little bit here. Gonna take a little bit of time. I probably left more material on here than I needed to. I may want to take a little bit of this off, maybe file it off. If I do, I'll do that off camera. It's working out okay. Just gonna be a little bit tired in the arm by the end. Alright, so this is how it's looking pretty good. Got it riveted over on the end with the ball peen hammer, and it's quite solid. So yeah, next I'm just going to be shaping up the handle, and I think that'll be the final step. And so what I'm doing now is I'm just kind of putting a groove around, which I'm then going to widen out so there's kind of a bulge in the middle and two kind of shrinks. One thing, if you do attempt to make this knife, I would probably thin down the tang a little bit before the end, because riveting this thing over was a big pain, and I had to hit it so many times it began to work harden, which can make it start to crack and then can cause you all sorts of problems. So it didn't too bad, but yeah, it definitely, I would say, thin this just a little bit, make it a little bit thinner and smaller. These little tiny wood rasps are kind of perfect for this. You can see it's half round. It's rounded on this side, flat on this side. So it's got coarse, not coarse, flat, and then coarse, not coarse, half round. So pretty much perfect for this sort of thing. Anyway. All right, so I've polished up the blade, finished out the handle. Yeah, I really like the way it's going. So this is the Sgian knife. All right, so that's how I made a Sgian dubh knife. I hope you enjoyed watching it, and I hope you learned something from it. Most of all, I just hope I inspired you to make something. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I'd appreciate it if you did. And until next time, farewell, wherever you fare.